This is a 360 worshipful moment with Zenzo Matola.
How do I pastor my congregation? Well, as a worship leader, you have a responsibility to teach your choir, your worship team, your band, but also as a worship leader, you literally have the responsibility through your worship, through your leading of worship, to teach and pastor your congregation. Number one, teach your congregation to be the choir. Don't just do all the singing. You need to have moments where you stop and you let them sing and hear themselves. You know, I like to do this when I lead worship. Actually, my friends make fun of me because I like to say, just the people, just the people. You got to have a moment where you break down the music, all the crazy driving calms down, and people can just worship and hear themselves. You are teaching them to be a choir. That way, you're not just singing, but the people are the choir. But also, a lot of times I go into meetings where the worship leader is just, he's almost like a cheerleader. Do this, run, jump, shout, sit. You gotta be at a place where you balance from that. The cheerleading is to encourage people to do these things, but it's not to. Sometimes we can overdo it so much that we cripple their congregation. They don't know what to do unless we're cheerleading. We're pointing out commands. So sometimes you need to just worship. If you want them to lift hands, you lift hands and worship, and keep doing this consistently, and you're going to realize that it's just going to be a matter of time before they begin to lift their hands because you're lifting your hands. And so train your worship team from a place where you don't become a cheerleader or a drill surgeon, but you become a worshiper and they're following you. Teach your congregation to flow in freedom. Teach them to dance and celebrate and cry if they want to. But if you're tight and you're uptight and you're like this, they're not going to flow in freedom. They're not going to be able to just flow and let go. You let go. You worship. You cry. You sing. You jump. You dance. You celebrate as the Lord is leading you. The more you do it, you're going to realize your congregation is going to follow you in that same direction. Lastly, you have to have a time where the pastor of your church together, maybe with you, if you don't teach, if you don't have a teaching ministry, encourage your pastor to speak on the topic of worship. We have 365 days in a year and so many Sundays in a year, about 50 something. I can't remember how many Sundays there are in a year. But listen, you want to make sure that at least 10% of those Sundays you are talking about worship, because worship is one of the most important things that there is. We love God and we worship. So make sure, besides just the leading and the singing and all that, that there are times where the pastor is teaching messages on what is worship. What are the different ways that we worship? Why should we worship? Why do we worship? Why were we created to worship? And if you're a teacher, do some workshops as well and teach the congregation on the importance of worship. That's how you pastor your congregation how to worship.